Misfits, people ask me all the time about tools that I use in my life and business to maximize my success. I usually start by telling them one of my most powerful tools is my morning habits. And of course, they look at me somewhat confused. I then explain how important it is for me to center myself and how I begin my day and plan for my success. It's critical to consistent high performance. And it doesn't take me long, about 5 or 10 minutes, because I use a great resource called the 5-Minute Journal. The 5-Minute Journal is the simplest, most effective way I've ever found to start your day in the right mindset, doing the right things, and set yourself up for success. And it is exactly what it says, a 5-minute exercise you can do each day. Let me ask you, if you could reach your next level in your life and business by spending just 5 minutes of focused time a day, would you do it? I bet you would. And I know it works because I've experienced the power of it. And you can get your 5-minute journal simply by going to www.misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. Do what I do. Use this amazing resource to give yourself an edge in your performance and your success. Get your 5-minute journal today.
Hello, Misfit Entrepreneurs. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it is our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs, with a specific focus on their misfit side, the specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you're new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. This week's Misfit Entrepreneur is Doug C. Brown. Doug is the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies and the creator of the Double Your Sales methodology, a proven math-based model that helps entrepreneurs, business professionals, and companies grow predictable and reliable sales revenue. Doug's career spans over 4 decades, beginning with first 12 years in the U.S. military, followed by explosive results as president of sales and training for Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, where he grew sales by over 4,000% in just 6 months. And since then, he's built or advised over 35 businesses, generated over $960 million in revenue for clients, and helped companies like Intuit, CBS Television, and Procter & Gamble become sales powerhouses. He's also the founder of Vivitno. It's a cutting-edge sales automation platform that supercharges follow-up, boosts retention, and drives productivity. Top podcast guest, award-winning sales leader, and one of the most sought-after minds in building high-performance, scalable sales systems. So if you're someone who's ever struggled with creating a consistent sales process, motivating your team, or scaling beyond your current revenue ceiling, the episode that you're about to hear is your blueprint for success. So, Doug, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
Hey, Dave, thanks for having me here on the Misfit podcast. Yes, I am. I'm good to go here.
Well, it's great to have you on. And, you've got a really unique story from the military to working with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to all the things that you've done. So take 5 minutes or so and just tell us, how did you get to where you're at?
I started working at the age of 3 for my father's business. And that's really how I got to where I am today, honestly. At 3 years old, I loved it. I got paid 25 cents a week. I swept floors. My dad had an industrial machinery repair company and sales company. And by the time we were 5.5 to 6 years old, they pushed us out in front of clients and we started writing orders. And I remember right around when I was 6.5 maybe, I remember I was getting 25 cents an hour at that point. And that was like huge, to me. And but then I got a part and I noticed I sold the part for $20, but we paid $10 for it. And in my little 6-year-old brain, it went, wait a minute, I'm working all week long for $10, but I just did this in 6 minutes. So how can I recreate that process, right? That's where I've started learning the power of leverage in selling. And then I sat down and, on like crayon or whatever, and I started drawing, if I sold this many parts and I got paid this for this many parts, I would be able to make this. And that's kind of how it all started off, and then we worked with my dad. All of us did this, all 4 boys. It was a great job. They bring us to the bar for lunch when I was like 6. I heard my mother wasn't happy about that, but that's what happened. It was a great job. I learned a lot and I was privy to be able to sit in on the conversations my father was having with the CEOs of companies. So it just sort of osmosis started setting in. And a lot of them were talking about the same thing. if we pay for this repair, we've got to make this many sales. If we buy this new industrial equipment, we need to make this many sales to offset this. And so I think just hearing over the years, I started thinking, okay, well, we need this many sales to offset this. We need this many sales to do this. We need this much money to be able to do that. And I think over time, what happened was it just kind of sunk in. It's like, oh, this is math. And so we can apply math and metrics to anything and come out with something predictable as long as the math is achieved.
And so you went into the military. Obviously, there was like the stint in the military where it's not so much sales, right? So what made you do that? And then is there anything, I guess, that you took away from the military that ultimately helped fuel your sales career?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we don't think about selling in the military, but we're constantly selling ourselves, right? You want to make higher rank. It's not just time and grade, it's achievement. And, in 15 months, I went from a private to a sergeant, which was kind of like way ahead of the curve. And it was because I was doing the same thing. I was repeating the same behavior that I had learned throughout, which is, okay, achieve and add value, achieve and add value. And crazy enough, I originally wanted to go in the medical field in the military, and some recruiting sergeant talked me to go into the artillery because he said, well, you'll get rank faster and they'll pay you a $1,500 bonus. What do you know at 19, right? And he was right about the rank. But I ended up in something that was math based. It was, calculating artillery fire, coordinating artillery fire for ground, air, sea, all of that stuff. And it was highly math processed. And again, it was like, all right, if we calculated this and calculated the wind speed and the trajectory of the shell and how it rotates and how it needs to go out 6 miles from this location, it was math. And again, I pulled a lot of that from the past. And so, recurring theme, right? But the military, what I really learned from the military was, it is, you can endure anything that you need to for 6 months. And so there's a lot of up times and down times in every business. And you just got to look at it as this is an intermediary thing. It's not, it's not going to end us. And, I remember one time we were sleeping out in a field and it was 18 below zero. And we were in sleeping bags. I mean, that's cold, no matter what kind of sleeping bag you're in, And, to be out there for 10 days, it's like, I should get me out of here. But, you just come with this mentality. It's like, I'm just going to keep working through it and make it a little better, a little better, a little better. One thing I learned in the military was if you focus on problems, you don't get solutions most of the time. So you have to focus on solutions to take yourself out. And too many people in business, what I've noticed, Dave, is they focus on symptoms of the problem versus removing the cause of the problem, which is the solution. And the way we get there is we focus on the solution. So I pulled a lot of great stuff, confidence levels and, digging in, when times get tough. Because when you work for your father, everything was already covered. My grandfather, my dad built the business, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I was just a piece of the puzzle and, I had all that goodwill coming in. But when I started doing it on my own from scratch, very, very different game.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit because you're known for, right, helping companies create this really predictable, reliable, measurable kind of sales engine, if you will. And you've got that double your sales methodology. So take us through, like, what is the methodology? What are the core components of it? What should we understand?
Well, the first thing is to get a truthful goal. And I know this sounds kind of like, what? That it? But the reality is most people really don't know what their end goal is. I just had a conversation with a business partner this morning. We're rolling out something new in a company that we own. And I'm like, what do you want out of this? Like, what is the financial numbers that you want? When do we want it by? And I had to keep extracting it out of him. And we've known each other for quite a while. So most humans, I have found, really don't know the exact truthful goal. So, because here's the thing, if somebody says to me, I want to triple my business, I can build a plan for that. But then if it's like they, the marketing budget's more than they want to go, or the headcount they've got to hire is more than they want to go, or whatever, they'll start backing down that goal. So truthful goal, number one out of the gate. And then, we figure out what kind of amount of sales we need to get to that truthful goal by doing the right math. But a lot of people don't figure the right math, Dave. What they do is they leave things out. They go, well, I need 100 sales to get here, right? Like, here's my average sale cost, 100 sales. And then I'll start asking questions. Well, what's your refund rate? What's your churn rate? What's the inflation rate affecting your industry? Metrics like that. And then we start applying those to that, because what ends up happening inevitably is they may need 135 sales versus 100 to actually achieve the goal. Once we get those two things kind of settled, the next thing we do is look at the ideal right fit buyer. Because I noticed all the way through, like I've had the privilege, when I was doing especially with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, and we were driving 1,000 to 3,000 business leads a week. So I had the great privilege of being able to talk to a ton of businesses. And what I noticed was a recurring theme that most of them didn't understand who their ideal right fit buyer was. So again, I did some research and I was shocked that Harvard Business School has done this research. Wharton Business School has done this research. Big companies like Marketo and, Adobe and companies like that. And they all conclude the same thing. It was weird that 97% of people selling, in part or in full, do not know their ideal right fit buyer attributes. That's really high. Mm-hmm. And so that's the next thing we dial them in on. Okay, who's your buyer who buys the best, spends the most, not a pain to deal with, buys the quickest, you love working with, those type of things. And then we start to narrow in targets to go after. And now it's about applying the math. And so the first step out of the gate is, how many outreaches are we making, whether we're doing inbound or outbound traffic, right? How many of those are resulting in connections? How many of those are resulting in responses? How many of those are resulting in appointments if we're doing appointments, let's say? How many of those are getting to a presentation stage if that's what we want to measure? We got to figure out what we're measuring. How many of those result in sales? How many of those result in follow-up sales? How many of those result in sales expansion, new clients, sell them something else, increase buying frequency? We look at a lot of these metrics, and quite frankly, there's only 11 or 12 metrics that you really need to measure on a regular basis. And those metrics will tell us a story. And what we do is we put massive prospecting behind that, creating 6 new ways in a year to go after new business. And then conversational selling, those who have to conversationally sell, we put that process in. A big one that people miss, why I developed the SaaS software that you mentioned in the beginning, so thank you for the plug, was follow-up. People are dropping the ball all the time. So we automated the follow-up and took it off people's plate. Follow-up in itself can get you a 5 to 15% revenue increase.
Absolutely.
So, and then I think the most important part of the whole process that we do is we must work on the mind triggers and mind shaping. And a lot of people don't do that in their sales. They don't coach their people on those processes. And what people don't realize is people have childhood wounds. They have things that are from the past, and they hold them from actually doing certain actions unless we address the triggers of those situations and be able to reframe those. And I learned this, frankly, initially from Tony Robbins,
Yeah. So are you talking about for the prospect specifically or for the people doing the selling?
Oh, that's a great question. It's both, actually, right? Because, so if you take, for example, can I do a little plug? Is that okay, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
Not a soft plug. I wrote a book called Win-Win Selling, Unlocking the Power of Profitability by Resolving Objections. So I wrote the book on the psychology and the philosophy of an objection. Because the reason I did this is people have challenges with these objections. And what people tend to do is they tend to move somebody from a discomfort state, right? So somebody says, oh, I don't have the money. I got to talk to somebody. I got to, I don't know if now's the right timing, whatever it is. They're expressing some discomfort, which is really fear when it comes down to it. But what most people do in objections is they try to move them from fear to buying confidence in one fell swoop. And what I taught people is, no, you've got to move them from fear to neutral first. They've got to be open to the opportunity to move to buying confidence. And this is where people miss it all the time. So like if somebody's in the state like, I can't. Well, their limbic system, the side that governs our quick emotions, is saying, heck no, ain't gonna happen. No matter what, there's no other possibility. If we try to get them to buy from that standpoint, they're just going to keep digging in, pushing in, because the limbic system's going threat, right? And so we want to move them from there to a state of perhaps I could. And that's where we start to move them to neutral. I won't go through the whole thing, but the point being is we've got to work on these triggers because your salespeople in your company, they have triggers too. Hey, we got to make phone calls now. We got to make cold calls. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't do that, man. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get the, I was brought up in an environment that said never interrupt people. And now you want me to interrupt people, right? And they may not consciously realize it, but that's what's going on with them. So we attack those triggers and help them reframe that process. And, that helps solidify the whole overall methodology, if you will.
Is there a common set of those triggers that you find across most salespeople and prospects? So if somebody's listening, thinking about this, they can start to work on them?
Yeah. So it goes back to the first thing. Like we have to find out what the goal is of the salesperson. And as importantly, why the heck they want it. Because the why usually starts revealing the triggers. I was just talking to a gentleman, and he's like, well, I want to do $500,000 this year. And I said, why? He goes, I have no clue. I just want to do $500,000 this year. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I've said it a ton of times on the show, and it's true. And this is a great, crystallization of it is that most people don't get what they want because they don't know what they want.
Exactly.
The exact same thing. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the key behind what motivates human beings. I was just having this, I have a friend, he lives overseas now. And, I'm married to a nice Polish gal and he noticed that. And he's like, maybe I should get a Polish gal. And I said, well, why do you want that? And he goes, well, and he started naming off the attributes of great stuff that my wife is just a natural person doing, and I said, well, why do you want that? And then he started telling me why he wanted that. And now his desire now is to go to Poland instead of where he is to try to find a wife. Right. And here's my point to the story. We do more for that reason than we will ever do for a fictitious number. I mean, you just think of all the, just guys trying to date someone else. We do insane stuff that we would never even think of as logical sometimes, but we do it because we have a driving end result of the why. And so when it's salespeople, we want to start there and figure out why they want it. Once we understand why they want it, now we want to figure out why they're not getting it. And so once we understand what those two aspects are, why they want it, why they feel they're not getting it, now we can start to understand what the trigger levels might be. And it's real easy. I can teach people how to do this quickly. Step number 1, you got to create awareness around what's going on because most people don't understand their triggers. And so what I get them to do, Dave, is I get them to carry a business card. And anytime on the back of the business card, they tell a non-truth, either to themselves or someone else. Tiny non-truth, big non-truth, doesn't matter. Strike the card. And just do this for a couple of weeks. And what you start to realize is you'll start to see the pattern like, oh, okay, when somebody says this, I react fearful this way. And I lie. Might be a tiny lie, like, why'd you miss the meeting? Oh, traffic was, unbearable or whatever. You spent a little extra time with your kids that morning, right? It's like, it's people do these type of things. Or it might be a huge lie, like, why wasn't the contract sent? It must have got lost in transmission. It definitely went out in the mail, right? And they never sent the contract, right? Which resulted in a lost sale for themselves or the company. So, whatever it is, start tracking that. And then from there, once we start to see the pattern, now we can identify the pattern and go in and interrupt the process of the pattern and reframe the pattern. And so if I was coaching a manager, a division leader, an owner of a company who had sales team members, we must have weekly coaching on this process. And when we have weekly coaching on this process and able to give them tools to overcome this, their sales close rates will go up. Their sales satisfaction rates from their clients will go up. Sometimes extreme, Dave. I had one gentleman, he went from $140,000 a year in commissions to 2.1 million in commissions in 1 year. And I asked him what was the difference. And he said to me these words: I am a blankety blank liar. I used to be. I'm no longer. And just the fact that he felt better about himself, he stopped lying to his clients. He was lying to his wife. He was lying to everybody, right? And people will start to notice different things. We just bring a different energy to the process.
No, it's amazing too that most people, especially with sales, most people are in their own way. Salespeople are, and most, really, one of my favorite questions when interviewing a salesperson is, how do you know how to sell? Because most people have never been taught how to sell. They're in a way, they're accidental salespeople. They fall into it, right? So when you do what you say, where you start like weekly coaching on how to become better, in the process of selling, just getting better at the process. You don't even have to be that much better of a salesperson. Getting better at following the process better will close more deals, right? So it's amazing the little twiggers that make all the difference. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and that's part of the success I've had in life, what you just said, which is sometimes people ask me, can you help me? And I recognize exactly what you just said. Well, we don't have enough activity going on. We don't have a process for the activity. So we just create the process for the activity and create the activity accountability, and then hold people accountable, and then show them ways to get that easier. And sometimes, like, I know owners who are going to hear this conversation we're having are probably, some of them are like smiling, some of them are probably crying right now. But I recall a client I had, they were kind of did like online company marketing for real estate agents, and they had never asked for a referral. They had been in business for 8 years, almost 9 years, and they never asked for a referral. And so I went in one day and I said to the owner, I said, we need to do referrals. He said, yeah, sure. Just work with the team, will you? And I went in and I talked to the team. I said, hey, let's do referrals. And they all said, hell no. And I'm like, you're going to fight me or fight your boss. It's up to you, but we're going to do referrals, right? All I want you to do is just, and I gave him a simple little process. Ask this question at the end of every conversation you have, whether it's a cold call or it's an opening or whatever. And so, I said, just humor me. Let's do it for a week. And they said, all right, we'll do it. Next week, come back. We got 2 referrals. Okay, great. See, Doug, told you this was a waste of time. That's what they said to me. I said, humor me again. Just let's try it again. Next week, no referrals. Right? I'm like, how many of you asked? And they were like, oh. It's like, I'm like, you don't understand. I'm tracking your numbers. You asked half the time you asked the week before. So let's humor me one more time. They're like, listen, we don't want to do this. I said, it's not up for grabs. It's like, you got to tell your boss, And I said, just one more week. And they did. And they came back and they said, nothing. And I said to him, Dave, I go, how many referrals we get this week? They go, and in the tone, I knew something was up. And I said, plus I've been looking at the numbers, so I knew what was going on. And they said, well, 1. And I said, well, great. Well, what kind of revenue did we pull out of that? And they said, we closed it. And I said, oh, that's awesome. How, small, medium, large? 3,900 locations across the United States.
Yep.
So, I had to work on their mind triggers through the process. And so but what your point is if you can get the activity and the process down and you just amp that up, if you had a static close rate of, I don't know, 20%, and we just increase that by 10%, 20%, pick a number, you're still going to get a static close rate of 20%. So your revenue will go up.
Right.
And if you make it more efficient, your profits go up in the same, capacity, and your salespeople are happier.
Yeah, that's a great point all around. In fact, I want to take a quick, just 1 minute break there because I want to come back. I want to talk about a little bit more on maybe things that people are forgetting that are the little things that can make a difference, and then a little bit more about your journey too. So we'll do that. We'll be right back.
Misfit Entrepreneurs, I want to tell you about an amazing resource that will have tremendous impact on your business and your revenue. I have used this solution in multiple businesses and it has made an incredible difference. Let me start by asking you something. Do you know how much it costs your business when just one salesperson doesn't step up to deliver? Do you really know? The cost can easily exceed 6 figures for just one bad hire, not just from the time, effort, and resources in hiring them, but from the lost business and downtime as well, as you have to go find a new salesperson and everything surrounding that. And the last thing any growing business can afford is to have a failed hire, especially in sales, the revenue driver for the company. But what if there was a way to know someone checked all the boxes of a great sales hunter and closer before you ever hired them? That's the solution that I found from a company called Sales Drive. They have created a solution called Drive Test. It's a powerful hiring tool that separates high-performance salespeople from pretenders by measuring the most critical personality trait needed for success in sales: drive. Drive is composed of 3 non-teachable traits shared by all top producers: the need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism. And knowing who has drive before the interview dramatically increases your chances of selecting salespeople who will produce for you while avoiding those costly bad hires. I've used the solution and it works. In fact, it works so well, I've referred them to every company that I work with. And they've created a very special offer so that you can try them for free as well. You can get a free drive test assessment today at www.misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive, all one word. Start using the drive test in your hiring and never hire a bad salesperson again.
Okay, so Doug, you were mentioning about how like little things can move 5, 10, 20% can make such a huge difference. Like, what is it that most entrepreneurs miss when they're building their sales engine? Like, what's the one main thing that, if they solve for it today, is going to make a difference for them?
Well, if they have a sales engine today, measuring it, I just like they don't do it. Like they'll set, some people will set a few KPIs out, but they really don't hold accountability to the measurements of it. So I'll start with that. And then we want to go to like, I don't have a sales team, we can talk there. I'll give you a couple examples. So people think that even companies who have big names or whatever, oh, they can't have those issues, but they do. And so I'll give an example. Chet Holmes, love the man. When I became president of sales and training for Chet, if those of you don't know Chet, he wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. It was the best-selling sales book 7 years in a row. And then eventually Tony Robbins came in and bought into the process and, even became bigger. But when I took over, I was looking at the math, the metrics through the things. And what you do is you look at the ratios of metrics. So they had a radio ad that came in and the front end sales team sold a $229 2.5-hour training. And that 2.5-hour training was awesome. It was worth way more than $229. But they had almost a 16% refund rate on that training. And that stuck out to me. I'm like, what? Now, the first thing Chet said to me is like, we're running too heavy on the marketing spend to our output on this training. And I said, okay. So I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, okay, we got a 16% refund. Hello, right? Why are we got a 16% refund? And so I went to the presenter team, the sales team that was doing the online presentation because they did them live. And I said, why? And they go, people, they refund. So I listened to the recordings and here's what was going on. But almost at the end, like 2 hours into the presentation, they would say these words. They would go around the room, Dave, and they would say, okay, so Dave, how much did you get in this training today? And you'd say something like, well, I found for $450,000. And then they go to the next person, the next person, the next person. And then they would say these words, okay, well, folks, if you don't think we earned our $229, I want you to get off this call right now and call 1-800. I want you to get off the call right now, off the call. Call this number. If you don't think we earned every penny that we asked for of that $229, call and we'll refund your money. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, we're inviting the refund, right? So here's what I did. We kept the same process. We went around the room. And by the way, I took this from Tony Robbins. I saw him do something like this one day, and I was like, I'll try this. We went around the room. We said, Dave, how much you got? 450,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Went through like 20 people. And then I taught them, I said, add them up. And at the end, we would have something like, okay, folks, we found $36,425,000.16 on this call today. And Tony always would go, everybody say aye, right? So I said, we're going to change the wording, go, everybody say woohoo. And that's what we did. Everybody say woohoo. And everyone in the room went woohoo, right? And then I changed the call to say, well, I think we earned our money today. What do you think? Yes. And everyone went, yes. We went from a 16% refund rate to within 2 days having it under 1%. And it never changed.
The psychological thing too is you got them to agree and say yes and everything too, versus just going straight to the negatives. It's a big difference psychologically as well.
So you got to measure all the metrics. We changed the front end sales team close rate from 12.1% to 21.7%. We took the sales presenter close rate from 21.6% to 43.2%. Right? Just by changing metrics and changing the messaging and the language a little bit, we added literally tens of millions of dollars to the bottom line.
You mentioned several times on some of the things you've learned from Tony and even Chet. Are there any other really big lessons that you took away from working with both of those? And I think back then, if I remember right, this was business breakthroughs, right? Isn't that what they called it?
Business breakthrough. Yeah, it started as Chet Holmes International, then went to Business Breakthroughs International. Tony is like, a lot of people don't think Tony's like the sales guy, but Tony's like one of the best salespeople in the world, if not, right? And when I used to watch Tony from stage and I'd be like, oh my gosh, he just, did this. And so one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins is no matter how good you are, you always constantly and never endingly improve. And he calls it CANI. People, might recognize that, constant and never ending improvement, but Tony practices it. And so no matter how good you are, you can always get a little bit better. And I learned from Alan Weiss, who's written like 68 books, I think, on consulting. I mean, this guy's brilliant. Alan said, if you get 1% better a day, you're twice as good in 70 days. So you get the compounding effect of this CANI going on every single day. But most people don't have the training. So back to your question, right? You've got to train your people. And I come into companies, I used to go in a lot, and I'd come in and I'd say, we're going to train your sales team 4 or 5 times a week. And they're like, we're not going to train 4 or 5 times a week. I'm taking my salespeople out of the field 4 or 5 times a week. I'm like, 30 minutes a day, every day. Let's make them better. Because I know that 1% a day, twice as good in 70 days. And so, if people don't think this works, I took a sliding company that they asked me to come into. They fell from 50 million to 48 million in 6 weeks, and they were on the slide. And in 2 years, we went from that point to $110 million. And the majority of what we did was put process in, like you said, Dave, and train them on process and mindset throughout the whole process. And we did it 4 days a week. So, so my advice to people who have...
I see a lot of pro athletes that practice every day.
The great ones that we call the great ones, whether it was Wayne Gretzky or Tom Brady or whoever, right? Or the ones that are up and coming as the great ones today, or the ones that have just been in it for so long. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, I think, is like 43 or 42 or something. Like, that's old for football. But, how did Tom Brady come back? Not just because I'm a Patriots fan, right? He left for the Buccaneers. How dare you, Tom? But, but it's they show up early and they are constantly and never endingly improving. Chet had something he used to talk about, which was pig-headed discipline and determination. That no matter how bad things got or no matter how good things are, you just continue on. And I had the fortunate part of helping Chet, build part of the consulting division in the company as well. We would travel, and he said to me these words one day. He said, "Doug, it took me 5 years to get the relationship with Jay Abrahams. I followed up with him for 5 years, and I made, I think he said $5 million, if I remember correctly. He said it took me 17 years to follow up with Tony Robbins, and I will retire off of this off of this one." Right. So how many of us have the pig-headed discipline and determination to follow up for 17 straight years? Right. And so, that's when things get tough. Again, pulling from the military, you can do anything for 6 months, but you got to get in there and just keep grinding and, always look for the leverage points to make it better. So that's what I would do if I had an existing sales team. I would, and if I didn't know how to do it, frankly, I'd get a third party in there to help me out. And if I had a new team, I would do the exact same things that I'm talking about. The only difference is in how do you hire the new team versus an existing team, because they're already there.
Any, to that point, any thoughts, tips on hiring great salespeople?
What was the question, Dave? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Any thoughts or tips on hiring a great salesperson? Say somebody's listening to this going, I get it. I don't have a sales team yet. I need to hire a sales team. Like, how do I find the right person, to start?
Yes. Big conversation, but I can make it pretty simple for people. I've had the pleasure of hiring, I don't know how many, certainly 1,000, probably, salespeople. So number one, it goes back to the truthful goal. What do you really want? What type of salesperson do you really want? Because most people don't think about this. So, I'll use Chet Holmes again when, the business breakthroughs. On the front end sales team, we needed people with super high confidence levels, right? Super high. We used to call it ego state. Too much ego state, they're arrogant. Not enough ego state, they can't close. Oh, imagine, you hear a radio ad, you're driving on the highway, you're calling in for a free report, and now we're selling you a $229, training. You got to get somebody that's going to take their credit card out of that. A lot of objections come up with that. So you need somebody who can persist through that process and hear no 18 times and still keep going, so to speak. So what kind of salesperson do we want? Now, that type of person's great, but you don't want them necessarily in a place that's a high nurturing environment. Like let's say a medical sale that you're trying to sell to services to somebody who has, cancer or, trying to get their, that type of, you still need ego state there, but it can't be so high because those type of people be like, psst. So I'm unempathetic that, that's that harsh sales line that people don't like, right? So we need people who are super high in their empathy as well. So you want to look at the balance between those two originally. And then once you kind of figure out exactly what that is, now you know how to write the ad to attract them. And this is where people mess up all the time. They write a weak ad. And I don't mean weak as their ad's weak. I mean, they write a weak ad to attract the right person. So, if we want somebody who's a high closer, going to run through a lot. I just wrote one, because we opened up an insurance brokerage and, we started it out and we put the ad out and it just said, insurance superstars wanted, if you want to enter this field or you are already in this field, you're going to join a company that's growing. Processes aren't in place like they would be in 6 months. Think of this as an Arctic expedition where you're going to go out, you're going to get frosty, cold, icy, water in your face, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're the person that can endure through that and wants to make this kind of money, we want to talk to you. If not, don't apply. So it's one of those things that we've got to be really clear. Once we get that down, now we have to have a consistent hiring process. And this is where people mess it up all the time too, right? They go on gut feel. Oh, I like that person. Dave, you're such a nice guy, come on in, right? Or, so what is the consistency that we can measure? Just like we would measure a lead coming through a company and lead score it, we got to lead score the individual. And we ask the same questions to every single person so we can rate that person. We have a system set up to flush out the ones we shouldn't be interviewing in the beginning. So let technology handle that. At Chet Holmes, we used to put a web page up. I did the exact same thing for this offer that we're just doing. Tells you everything you need to know, including your compensation, including what we want from you, including what you want from us. And read that page. I test people on that page because we say, read that page. If they won't read that page, I know they're not going to pay attention to critical insurance information for the clients. So you're out. And we just keep going through. So you get a consistent process down for that. As you get the consistent process down for that, you then have a rating system, and then you have a team that votes on that process. Those that make it through, great. Those that don't, it's okay. The biggest challenge I see in hiring, people don't have, as you said, a process. They don't follow the process. They don't adhere to the process. And most importantly, they try to do it on gut feel versus doing it on up. The last thing is, if you don't have training, you got to tell them you don't have training, but you still have to train them. And you want to train them not on just onboarding training, but on how to sell what you're doing. And even if they're a top producer, they still want it. And they want accountability, and they want to know you're there, and they want to be valued, and all of that type of thing. So it's a big, complex subject, but I'm trying to break it down as the time we have.
Those are things, low-hanging fruit stuff that people can act on. It's always 5% idea, 95% execution. So, it's just executing on these things. We're at the, really the end of our time, but are there any other tips or anything from a sales standpoint you think people should know maybe that we didn't cover?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a misfit, right? When I heard the title of this podcast and my team brought it to me, I'm like, this is for me. I'm a complete misfit. I have screwed up more than I've succeeded. I once heard Mark Cuban say this on Shark Tank. And if I could have reached in and hugged him, I would have on the TV. So if you're listening to this, thank you. He said, you only have to get it right once to set yourself up for life. And I want people to always keep that in mind, that, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail, but just get it right the one time, right? And that one time can set you up forever. But, if you can get it right more than one time because of consistency and the things that you and I have been talking about, you'll be in a much better place and understand, it doesn't always just go straight up. In fact, sometimes when it does, be aware, because that might be when you're going to implode if you don't have things in place. So that would be my advice.
No, that's a great point. It's a great way to end it before we get to your Misfit 3. And we're going to do that. We're going to take just one more 1-minute break, and we'll be right back with Doug's Misfit 3.
Before we get into today's Misfit 3, I want to take a minute to talk to you about a free resource available to you from the Misfit Entrepreneur, the Misfit Minute. The Misfit Minute is the free weekly resource packed with useful tips, tricks, and information from the world of Misfit entrepreneurs. It not only includes further resources on the week's Misfit Entrepreneur guest, but additional links, articles, and resources to help you be more successful. It's delivered every Friday to your inbox. To sign up, all you have to do is go to the homepage at www.misfitentrepreneur.com, and you will see the Misfit Minute sign-up page. Don't miss out on this great resource and all it has to help you. Sign up today and look for it this Friday.
Okay, it's time for Doug's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that he wants you to take that you could put in your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you're going to leave this earth tomorrow and you can only leave behind your best 3 pieces of wisdom for the generations that come after you to help them live their best life, what would those 3 things be? So, Doug, what are your Misfit 3?
I like we were talking earlier, I have probably a Misfit 300, but I'm trying to distill them down. The best things. I'm going to give advice that people gave me along the way that I felt really helped me and the business and life's journey. Number 1, usually things will take you 2 to 3 times longer and cost you 2 to 3 times more than you ever figured. So, that's just what happens. Number 2, you will make mistakes, so make room for them. Just as you would, everything you sell, some people are going to return it. Some people, there's going to be a percentage of odds of averages throughout the process. And you've got to make room for those things and not be emotionally wound out about what those things are. So, for example, if you want to make $1 million a year, you figure out what the numbers are, and you've got to build in the factor that out of that $1 million that you're going to net, there's going to be a certain percentage. And I think number 3, which I think was really great advice, is that you can't build something large alone. And so many people look at business or in life as, I got to take this majority share and I've got to be the one who's doing this and that. And if you look at the people who have been the most successful in life, they've had better people around them doing actually things that they either don't want to do or they're just not good at. And you've got to kind of build it from a team. And, that one took me a long time, Dave, to actually learn. I would have I got a $1.7 million business and I'm netting down that, $1 million out of that 1.7. And then I look at it, I'm like, I should be a $25 million company. Why am I only at 1.7? Well, I was holding myself from being able to grow because I was trying to say, I need to take all of this. And this is a mindset issue for a lot of, or mind shift for people. Right. And so, those would be my 3 best business pieces of advice. If I can give one personal one, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Bonus.
Don't take
Here it comes.
Okay. One of the things I've learned through life is that we take most of our stuff way too seriously. And if we think about it as I'm getting older, right? I mean, I'm 63 now. I look back on the things that I got upset at when I was 30, 35 years old. And I'm like, why? What was the point of indulging in, a week's long worth of being upset about this? There's a psychiatrist who put out on Netflix, it's called Stutz. And he said there's 3 things. You're always going to have some level of pain. You're always going to need some level of understanding. And you're always going to have to do some level of work. And happiness is how you handle those 3 components, process of the happiness. So the message really is that you're always going to have challenges and troubles and things that come through. But the emotional attachment we give those and the length of that attachment, if it's negative, that's suffering and that's optional. The quicker you can recover from the suffering, the happier your life will be, no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's an excellent Misfit 3 plus bonus, Doug. In fact, the bonus is maybe the best of those. So thanks for sharing that. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
They can contact me directly by email if they want at Doug@CEO Sales Strategies, sales and strategies of plural.com. My LinkedIn is Doug Brown 123. My phone number, area code 832-549-4836. Please no spam text. I would appreciate. And, if they just want to know something more, actually, if they want to join our newsletter, we have a CEOsalesstrategies.com. It's really good content. It's not like promotional. It's really good content. Or if they just want to know something more about me, just type in Doug C. Brown, revenue growth. Don't type Doug Brown because professional hockey players will come up and I can't skate to save my soul. So that's it.
Perfect. We'll link to all that in the show notes so that people can find it. The best show notes in the business for reasons I will talk about more in a second. But first, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneurs, your first episode with us, welcome. It is such an honor to have you with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you become a regular listener and subscriber. And for all of you that are with us week in and week out, thank you so much for your support. I cannot express how much your support of this show, makes such a difference around the world in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure and go out and check out the show notes of this episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself as part of my personal growth routine. Every single week, I go back through these episodes with amazing guests like Doug, and I take my best pieces of wisdom, insights, tips, things like that, and then I share those with you. So go out and check those out. And then go out and give this episode a rating and review. Like and comment it. Help share Doug's message, because we all know, and I say this in every episode, one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that Doug shared today was that missing link you were looking for to get to your next level. So share this with others. And again, Doug, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all your wisdom and insight today.
Dave, thanks so much for having me here. I'm so grateful to actually have the opportunity.